this. Get past this hard part. Writings for the Trotskyist press. Let's see what they have to say. And finally, quite in keeping with Trotskyist passion for ideas, his generous indignation at injustice was his sense of personal... What the heck? Why is it always like the first word? Restituted. Rectitude. I don't know how to say this. We're about to find out how it says. R-E-C-T-I-T. Yeah. Come on.
Rectitude.
Yeah, rectitude. A quality of being morally correct, honest, and honorable. Dude, this guy is like throwing him on a fucking platter. Rectitude, his idealistic approach to life. All who knew him intimately, even when he was one of the rulers of Russia, speak of it. Max Eastman, and also Boris Sorokyan, who, though a fierce proponent of Trotsky's politics, has said of him that there was nothing mesquin in his character, not a trace of, oh my gosh, another word, Jesus. Good start to the beginning. Great way to go right into it and be very fluid. Rascality. It is a noticeable characteristic of many great writers and philosophers, but a fatal noticeable characteristic. But a fatal weakness in a politician. You can see in all his writings. You can see it in all his writings. Was any other politician a similar eminence capable of saying the following at a public investigation? I can say that never in my life did I take the contrary of the truth. If you will, in plain words, a lie. I believe in our society, which is very contradictory, that the conventional rules of the conduct in family, society, and corporation, everybody is obliged from time to time not to say the truth. I committed it sometimes. I believe the question can be decided only by comparison of the lies I was obliged to give and the truth. I believe that in the balance, my truths are more heavy than the lies. It seems to me so in the more important question, decisive question, in the question upon which depend the actions of many people, of friends of their faith. It seems to me that I never committed such crimes. Trotsky had been through much, but the fundamental honesty of his character, his inner sensitiveness, as he quite unconsciously expressed them, here are very moving, but very revealing also. He was a materialist, but of the greatest idealist philosophers were surpassed the conclusions of his address to the Dewey Commission. Esteemed commissioners, the experience of my life in which there has been no lack of either of success or of failure, has not only not destroyed my faith in the clear and bright future of mankind, but on the contrary, has given it indestructible temper. This faith in reason, in truth, in human solidarity. At the age of 18, I took with me into the workers' quarters of the provincial town of Nikolaevsky. This faith I have persevered fully and completely. It has become more mature, but not less adherent. In the very fact of our commission's formation, in this fact, I see a new and truly magnificent reinforcement of the revolutionary optimism, which constitutes the fundamental elements of my life. C.L.R, Cromwell, Napoleon, Lenin, men of deeds, his place is among them, but he was not one of them really. by nature and inclination, he would have preferred the company of Plato, Aristotle, Spinoza, and Goethe. Thank you. History was not unkind to him personally. He got his chance before he died and took it with both hands. Men make history, and to understand history, we must understand men. Lenin and Trotsky. With the understanding of Trotsky as that type of person, we can now better understand his successes and his failures. After 1905 revolution, he met Lenin in Finland. They discussed politics and found themselves in general agreement against the Mensheviks on the political issues of the day. Lenin always suiting the action to the word, taunted Trotsky with refusing to join the Bolsheviks. Trotsky referred to the wander around for 12 hours between Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. He remained untaught by his experience of 1905 when the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks divided between them the leaders of the proletariat. Especially after 1905, a man intent on political power, on political influence, which is the first business of any politician, would have joined one or the other of these parties. Trotsky could not, and his reasons were essentially the reasons of a man repelled by Lenin's toughness, and that seemed to him an unscrupulousness of the Bolsheviks. How bitterly he complains. During the past three or 4 years of intensity party friction, the life of very many committees has consisted of a series of coups d'etat in the spirit of our court revolution of the 18th century. Somewhere way up on the top, somebody is in concrete. No, I can't say this word. Come on, there we go. INCAR. No, it's CER. CAR, yeah. CER. ATIN. Come on. Thank you.
Incarcerating.
Okay, incarcerating, replacing, choking somebody else. Somebody proclaims himself something. And as a result, the top of the committee house is adorned by a flag with a inscription, Orthodox Centralism, Political Struggle. He accused the central apparatus itself of starting a new discussion every month. The apparatus supplies the topic for it, feeds it by false materials, draws its summary, dispenses injustice, postpones a Congress for a year, and is now preparing a Congress for among its own apparatus, workers previously appointed who are to authorize the people on top to continue this work in the future as well. Thus, in 1917, found him in an insignificant organization, but for the Bolshevik Party created by Lenin, he would have been helpless, and his grasp of the situation and his gifts would have run to waste. Trotsky has stated emphatically that without Lenin, there would have been no October Revolution. He was fully capable of leading a revolution alone, but all the evidence pointed to the fact that without Lenin, he would not have been able to handle the Bolshevik Party. Trotsky never minimized the personal weaknesses, which he kept out of the Bolshevik Party till 1917. Lenin mitigated its consequences while he lived. When he died, Trotsky paid heavily. Trotsky rendered unestimable services to Russia, but twice his enthusiasm, his love of the idea nearly wrecked the Russian Revolution, despite the somewhat ingenious explanation of Berest-Lovetsky. In my life, the fact remains that he made a terrible error in 1918, that Russia would be saved by the international revolution. Lenin knew as well as he also that the October Revolution had to hold itself free of any stain of imperialism dealing. But Lenin said, "Peace now, for we cannot fight." Trotsky persisted in chasing a mirage of his own imagination and his obstinacy cost Russia dearly. He had voted with Lenin earlier. The peace would have been signed weeks before. He tries in place to balance Lenin's mistake in urging the attack on Poland in 1920 with his own in 1918. The comparison is quite false. Soviet Russia could afford a gamble in 1920. The whole point of 1918 was that the country was on the edge and could not take the slightest chance. In 1920, during the dispute on the trade union question, oblivious to the reality, he let his imagination run away with him again. He did not, okay, so this is the critique. He did not want to militarize labor, as the Stalinist layers report, but he wanted to fuse the trade unions with the state administration. His basic argument was that Russia was the social worker state, and therefore the trade unions as a workers' organization could administer the state. Lenin's reply was devastating. Comrade Trotsky says that Russia is a worker state. Excuse me, that is a subtraction. Had Trotsky had his way, he would have placed the Soviet state in mortal peril. Lenin saved Russia from the political consequences of such a blunder. He could save the party from the organizational consequences. Trotsky had taken up the cause with his usual enthusiasm, single-mindedness, and the emotional drive that had swept everything before it in 1905 and 1917, and in the formation of the Red Army. For a moment, Lenin was in the minority, but Trotsky had to be stopped, and Lenin held back on Zinoviev, Stalin, and others who had long been waiting their chance to discredit Trotsky. The falseness of Trotsky's position, the recklessness with which he advocated it, and Lenin's political generalship soon put an end to Trotsky's adventure. But Lenin, though recognized Trotsky's invaluable qualities, sought to guard against and more of these volcanic eruptions. There was a reorganization of the party functionaries. Krenetsky, Probrodnitsky, and others of the Trotsky supporters were disrupted. Less than 2 years after Lenin fell ill, and at the crises which followed the incapacitation, Trotsky, never concerned with his strength in the party's organization, found himself isolated. The whole episode is one of the most instructive in the history of the Bolshevik Party and in the political biography of Trotsky. He brought it on himself, not only in the political error. During the debates, Lenin carefully pointed out they, all of them, had more theoretical errors, but in the way he behaved. Trotsky without Lenin. Finally, so Lenin had there's part of the critique of Trotsky. Finally, in the crisis of 1923, Trotsky conducted himself like a philosopher who had spent his life in the study and had suddenly been asked to take charge of a policy at the party's conference. We do not wish here to raise the question of whether this policy by Trotsky or that could have succeeded or had better results than the one he followed. He himself, and for the immediate political aim. Wait, how are leftists exploiting the poor? Weird. Results that the following on one he followed. He himself, and for the immediate political aim, very rightly, always insisted on the economic and social factors of work, minimizing the personal factors. But his political naivety and the idealism of his character are almost incredible, but for his own unsuspecting documentation. Trotsky tells us how, over 40, with his head packed with history and a lifetime of political struggle behind him, he hesitated to make a bid for power because he did not want people to think he was too anxious to step into Lenin's shoes. The rest of his strategy is no less amazing. In the hand of Komarov and Stalin, he was a child. exaggerations when characterize these two incidents. Then characterize these two incidents. Hold on a second. What's going on? What? How did they give him hard labor? What are we talking about? Be more specific. Lenin sent him a private letter dealing with the urgent political questions in which Stalin and his clique of the movement were intensely interested. Trotsky immediately proposed to show the letter to Kamenevy, I can't say the word, and would have done so but that Lenin stopped him, pointed out that Kamenevy would show the letter to Stalin, who would inevitably deceive them. All who knew Stalin knew him for what he was. Trotsky knew that Stalin had attempted to poison Lenin's mind against him. He knew all the intrigues that were going on even before Lenin had the final stroke. Yet, reading his autobiography, he himself reported not one single action of his own to counter Stalin's intrigues. Instead, he sent the following message to Stalin by Kamenevy, quote, "I am against removing Stalin, but there must be an immediate and radical change. Let Stalin not overreach himself. There should be no more intrigues." Intrigues. I want to make sure that's intrigues. I don't know if that's right. I'll make sure. Bro, this guy's going off about leftists oppressing the fucking poor. He doesn't understand the emancipation for the workers and poor. He doesn't get it. Which kind of a leftist do that? That's my interest. That's my interesting question. Which leftists per se have done that historically? That's my question.
Intrigue.
Yeah, I was right. Intrigues. But honestly, cooperation never was a leopard more sincerely asking to change his spots. This dude, let's see this dude. What's this dude saying? No, we use the word equity. Oh my God, dude, this is wild. This is not being wise. Hey, keep them in there. They're giving us, they're giving us a whole bunch of, they're giving us engagement, which is good. This is not being wise after the event. Lenin saw to the ultimate end what Stalin stood for. His last writings show it without possibility of argument, and it is only within recent years that we have been able to understand their full urgency. Trotsky warned and warned and warned again, wandered about like a child in the forest of wild beasts. An embittered American anti-Trotskyite, George Maryland, gives meaning to his life by ceaseless attacks on Trotsky as having entered into the pact with Stalin to deceive the Russian people. Undoubtedly, owing to the political situation, Trotsky rightly or wrongly submitted to the suppression of Lenin's testament, and assisted Stalin to get out of the hole he was in on the national question. But such compromise, though there can be arguments and differences of opinions about them, are inevitable in the most principal party in the world, and no political party has ever more concerned with the principles than the Bolshevik Party in its heroic days. You don't have to. Oh, what did he say? What did he say now to get blocked? Oh, he just did the whole clown thing. Okay, understandable. Look at all these people trying to get in. It's amazing. Thank you for trying to get in. Appreciate it. What is the critic fails to see is whatever policy Trotsky was following, whatever tactical compromise he found it necessary to make, he himself, being the man he was bound to fail. That he was able to use his magnificent gift in the way he did was due to the fact that Lenin had created the Bolshevik Party. Who does not understand the letter B in Bolshevism. The last, yeah, just bad. Oh yeah, I saw that now. I saw that. I looked up the last of his blunders, which may be convincingly conveniently dealt with here was his political position on the Russian invasion of Poland, and particularly of Finland. As of 1920, pursuing an idea to the end, he repeated his formula: Russia is a worker state. It must be defended. Unfortunately for his followers, he did not stop there. He commanded the invasion, and perhaps for only time in his long career, found himself in an insoluble intellectual contradiction. Prove me wrong. Okay, dude, I'm reading, Uncle. Can't you tell? I'm reading. Are you like oblivious to like your own surroundings? Someone is reading. For if Finland was the outpost of imperialism, and Stalin was justified in crushing it when Trotsky's condemnation of the invasion was a mere gesture to the widespread disapproval and dismay of the workers. But sharp as were the differences between the present Workers' Party, which was expelled from the Socialist Party, a split was not necessary on this question alone. Bro, you don't know how to read it. Come on, dude. You can keep writing. Go ahead, keep writing in there. It's fine. But I can't respond to you. I'm reading. Trotsky knew that, but despite this unwillingness, he was cunningly maneuvered into a position in which his authority and energy were unscrupulously used to an aim he did not have in mind. When he recognized what was happening, it was too late. To the end, he remained what he was, a man incapable of leaving his main work and concentrating his power and intellect on the tricks and dodges which are inseparable from the politics. Unscrupulous men, not fit to clean his pen, could get, Jesus Christ, such a great man right there, could gain his confidence and get the better of him. Not the least significant was the tragic circumstances of his death. He had been warned against his murder, but this GPU agent earned his favor by the exaggerated devotion of Trotsky's political position. For 6 months, he discussed politics with the greatest living master of politics, and Trotsky never detected a false note, apparently set no trap for him. We can be certain that whoever else might have been deceived by an impostor, Mr. Joseph Stalin would not have been. In the end, the ideal expressed was more important and interesting to Trotsky than the personal expressing it. It was his strength, the cause of some of his greatest triumphs, but it was his weaknesses, the cause for some of his greatest failures. We must have him as he was. If you agree with this interpretation of his political character, then you will agree that the power of will and self-discipline with which he devoted himself to a type of work for which he so often expressed in personal distaste is, like so much about him, probably unsurpassed by any other figure of similar stature. From the theoretical heights. This guy doesn't know how to read the room, does he? Who's this guy? Anti-industrial action. Interesting. We are trying to do here. What we are trying to do here is to make the historical evaluation of Trotsky and his work. Nowhere is it so necessary and fruitful as in the consideration of the history. The bourgeoisie, particularly in this age, lives from hand to mouth. Philosophy has none. Mussolini writings on fascism enjoyed a merit obscurity. Mein Kampf is no more than a political card sharpening of Machiavellian, adapted to the age of mass production, finance, capital, and imperialism. No bourgeois critic can properly evaluate Trotsky's books. For any kind of historical evaluation, you need an end. For example, socialism and material forces. the revolutionary proletariat, and the colonial peoples, a political method, Bolshevism. This is ours. It is from there that we begin. Others may have their own and are welcome to it. But we have nothing. But having nothing, the bourgeoisie is at a loss, not only with politics, but with writing of all kinds. Today, the fascists are making history, and the Stalinists with them. Why have they not had anything more important or investigated to say? Molotov's fascism is a question of taste. It is at least original. Even that cannot be said of Stalin's. Also, solitary contribution to recent literature, the brilliant phrase that Russia would not pull anybody's chestnuts out of the fire. Against this, the similar curiosities set the body of Trotsky's writing. On the one hand, brutality, hypocrisy, lies, and cunning, clumsy and coarsely expressed. On the other, strength, honesty, high aspiration, and a sparkling intelligence, dynamic power, all betrayed through the medium of a style whose miracles were known even in translation. The bourgeois critics will explain it in terms of personal ability, a pattern and far-reaching error. The style is the man. The man like Schmittler and Trotsky speak for social order. An age, a class, a political system expressed itself through its great books. The Declaration of Independence and Lincoln's Gettysburg Address are two of the greatest pieces of writing in any language. Besides them, Winston Churchill, rhetoric is shoddy. Yet Churchill is a greater master of language than either Jefferson or Lincoln, and wants to win his war as much as they want to win theirs. His weakness lies in his historical circumstances. They had enormous historical confidence. Churchill's has none. He is doubtful of the past, fearful of the future. What does it say? It is historically that we must approach Trotsky's history of the Russian Revolution. We do not only take it as our own and judgment, it is it by its own standard. We compare it to other literary and political writings of this and other ages. We make a genuinely historical comparison. We shall find that in the same way as Marx and Engels stand above all who have concerned themselves with the analysis of society, as Lenin and Trotsky's ranked with the greatest of those who have helped to alter the lives of large masses of human beings. So Trotsky's history is far from being a brilliant history of a great event. It is the greatest history book ever written and one of the most stupendous and significant pieces of literature ever produced in any language. We do not intend merely to assert. We shall demonstrate. We must not be so short-sighted about these things. This tremendous achievement were the achievements of men, but these men could not do the things they did because they represented not something, a method, a system of ideas. They could do them because they were the advanced guard of something infinitely greater than their individual selves, a new society. At a time when our forces were small, we needed to maintain the Marxist tradition, ready for the day. The best way to maintain it is to understand it. One sure way to understand is through the history. But our pseudo-Marxists were certainly asked, what use is it that Trotsky wrote so well that Schmittler and Stalin write so badly? What does it prove? It proves 100 times over the historical significance of the ideas which Trotsky stood for. Great books do not drop from the sky. Monsieur pessimists are soused to the marrow in the vinegar of bourgeois empiricism and trained from childhood to worship the established fact. That is why to the greatest problem of the present day, the future of Marxism. They come armed with the scientific weapon and primitive man of man, the philosophy of simple addition. The Marxists have 600 members here, 80 there, 80 here, and 20 there. And on the other side, look at Schmittler's thousands of airplanes and millions of men. How obviously the Fourth International is doomed to failure. Trotsky looked at Marxism since 1840, and on that it had done faced the future, have confidence, and looked upon the ready reckoners as men looks upon little boys playing at marbles. They do no harm until they try to introduce their infantile accounts into the records of perspectives of mature men. We cannot judge history by its own probable effects upon our own tender hides. Any hillbilly in the wilds of Arkansas can do that. We must have historical perspective. Look a long way back and a certain distance forward. It will not then be difficult to see that the history of the Russian Revolution represents. It is a climax of 2,000 years of European writing and study of history. It is these and similar things that were in Trotsky's mind when with his last words he said that he was confident of the victory of the Fourth International, Western civilization in history. Oh, I'm glad you're critiquing Trotsky, because I think this is on the parallel line of C.L.R. James' critique of Trotsky. That one of the reasons why he moved away from Trotskyism. First, a brief review of historical hierarchy. Herodotus was the first, and he set himself to tell the history of the war between the Greeks and Persians before the material was forgotten. He was not an Athenian citizen. He was a very impressionable intellectual, widely read and widely traveled, who was caught by the romance of history. Okay, cool. He wrote down what he gathered, and from that day he has been the model of inspiration, whether they know it or not, of countless historians outside of Europe, outside of Asia, outside of everywhere else. But we lost sight of what is essential in him if we allow his love of a picturesque to obscure the purpose, the victory of Greece over Persia. It was the defense of civilization against barbarism, and the greatest peril that the Greeks had ever faced. He had a great theme, one which every civilized man of the Mediterranean coast would understand and feel. 30 years after, Thucydides, in his very first paragraph, repudiated Herodotus with singular acerbity. Oh my gosh, it's another word. I like it when they come in and they say so much crap that they don't even know what the hell they're saying. So funny. You guys wanna
acerbity.
Acerbity, a sharp, bitter, or harsh quality. A singular subverity. For so urban a man. Thucydides, I can't say his name, says that before the Peloponnesians war, nothing of importance had ever happened. It was as if a modern American historian watching the world situation had called upon the American people to stop reading about Columbus and to study his history of the 1914 war. Man of affairs, politicians, soldiers. This sober Athenian was sick of all this old tale telling in the face of the threat of Athens. He wrote a book which to this day was not excelled for gravity, ludicity, proportions, and knowledge of politics. He wrote with one aim, the glorification of Athenian democracy. Quote, our country is governed in the interests of many instead of a few. That is why it is called a democracy, end quote. It was democracy for the slaveholders. Still, how those words have echoed down the years, drowning the sighs and groans of Athenian slaves. The great Roman, Livy, and Tacitus wrote within a few years of each other. They hated the autocracy and depravity of the empire, and Levy, in particular, glorified the constitution of the Roman Republic and the stern virtues of ancient Rome. He gives one of the best speeches to Cato, denouncing a law which allows freedom of attire of Roman women. As Rome went to pieces without any future, men cling to the past which Livy had idolized for 40 years of labor. Rome fell, but Latin literature remained, and when the Renaissance brought back the study of the classics, all the growing forces of liberalism in Europe nourished them, and the vivid artistry and Republican sentiments of Thucydides, Livy, and Pulterich, and cursed tyranny in the language of Tacitus. By the end of the 19th century, Livy had been translated some 500 times. The Elizabethan age was famous for its translation. Amoyat translated Pulterich. The North translated Amyot, giving Shakespeare rich material for plays. To all these people, Livy and Pulterich, can't say his name right, were far more important than the Holoshend and the Froissart. The heroes of the French Revolution conceived themselves as heroic Romans of the Republican days. So did Bambouf. The finer shades of European history are the closed books without an understanding of what the classics meant to all the educated classes. For the generations, they learned nothing else at school. The climax came with Gibbon, who gathered together all the learning and classical consciousness of the centuries in his justly celebrated book. But 100 years ago, Genzat knew that for the scientific history of Rome, you had to look elsewhere than in the decline and fall. Gibbon's history was the historical peak and the age of enlightenment. He was a member of that cosmopolitan society of Voltaire, Frederick the Great, Catherine, and the French aristocracy, which flourished before the French Revolution. Even the barons' monarchy enjoyed this culture of Gibbon's. Devastating attack on Christianity was characteristics of educated society in his day, not excluding French bishops, aristocrats. Though he represented progress. Voltaire was a prolific historian of the same school. 2 generations after Gibbon, Michelet wrote the French Revolution with the erratic passion that made him a French classic. Melancholy, I think, made his political reputation in the struggle for the Reform Bill of 1832, and his history so dominated bourgeoisie English thought for a century that it is only since October 1917 that the Whig tradition has ceased to reign over all English academic writing. Yet he was so biased that his great history is fittingly called a Whig pamphlet in 4 octave volumes. Green was less crude, but of the same school. His short history of the English people first made history popular among all classes. All the English prejudice of the last 60 years were their beliefs in English history was one long struggle of liberty, culminating in the British Constitution. Their conception of themselves as a dramatic people born to freedom, and the Magna Carta legend, the Cromwell Protestant legend, all come straight from Green. These histories are some of them good, some of them bad. Green, the most popular is very bad, but it is not not in their importance. They do not. They do is, oh my gosh, what they do is to hold not a mirror, but a banner up to society. They give society, or more often a class, an image of itself, not as it was, but as it was. Jesus Christ. Or as it would have liked to be. In them is written the history of an age, but not in the sense that they thought they were writing. Gibbons portrays 18th century Europe as well as Roman Empire. These writings were great artists, powerful personalities, preaching a cause, and quote, they wrote so well because they saw so little. But all of them represented some powerful progressive idea, the great classic first, and these are the satellites after, and their satellites after dominated the thought of the bourgeoisie for 400 years. Even Gibbons, aristocrat, though he was an English aristocrat, and praised the Roman constitution in which he thought he saw the model of the British. Then suddenly, with Michelet and melancholy, I think, the line comes to a dead stop, and is taken up again only with Trotsky. Why? A few dates will help us. Michelet's book appeared in 1847 to 1850, and the fiery of history of the French Revolution was directly inspired by the 1848 Revolution, the events leading up to it, and his own beliefs of communism. Melancholy's first volume of the history of England appeared in 1848, but 1848 was the year when the Socialist Revolution first appeared. It was the year of the Communist Manifesto. The scepter began to haunt Europe. Sharp eyes were watching, and the call for liberty vanished from the bourgeois historical writings. On the grand scale, Mommsen, the history of the Roman Republic, appeared in 1854, 6 years after 1848. Not at all accidentally. He was a German. He loved parliamentary democracy, but he hated the proletariat, especially after 1848. There was only one refuge for him, Bonapartism, and the climax of his learned work on Rome is his description of Caesar as, quote, the perfect man. Bismarck and Napoleon III did their best to emulate it, if not the perfection, at least the entirety of Caesar. Carlyle, before 1848, had been so sympathetic to the workers as to win favorable notice from Marx and Engels, but 1848 drove him into the reaction, and henceforth he was an advocate of the hero, essentially Mommsen's, I can't say his name, entire and perfect man. The domination of world market enabled Britain to be a little more liberal. And Green published in 1874, but 6 years after Green called Cayley's the expansion of the British Empire, whose unintelligent thesis that the British found their empire in a fit of absence of mind did not prevent his book from being one of the most widely read of the days. Mahannen's influence of sea power in history, though not widely popular, was scarcely less influential. Mommsen, Carlyle, Bismarck, Nietzsche, Cayley's, Mahannen, all that they had to say of political importance was gathered into one tremendous volume, Spengler's Decline of the West, which was completed in 1917, during the very hours that Spengler was writing Finis to bourgeois civilization. Lenin was completing the state and revolution and imperialism in preparation for the Russian Revolution. In the face of the grandiose movement of social revolution, the slow accumulation, the dramatic confrontation, statements of position, retreats and advance, battles across the world for the future of society, in the face of all this, how mean and peddling are the smug calculations of our sneering accountants, blind to the historical process as a whole and unable to rise above their own inefficiencies. It is, as Trotsky would say, from this theoretical height that we can see what the history has resorted to the historical writings to give on to melancholy, to Trotsky. Liberty meant different things. Trotsky's conception is the widest. That is not the point at issue now. What is the matter that the proletariat at least calls for liberty? The bourgeoisie could not find one great writer to do so. Marx claims that the future of society rests with the proletariat, is demonstrated as clearly in historical writings as the economic analysis. This guarantees nothing. To show rather the future of any liberty that we may look forward to lies is not guaranteed of its success. But this reactionary and cowardly sentiment, masquerading as realism, draws strength as reaction always does from ignorance. There is something very concrete to the great historians, propagandists, though they were not a single broad political step forward in modern European history has ever been taken in the name of tyranny. The exalted sentiment of the popular historians always related to economic expansion and political progress. Even Christianity, the ideological successor of the Roman Empire, spoke in the name of liberty of the individuals, his right to the disposition of his own soul, opposed to the Roman state and slavery. The Reformation saw itself as a revolt against papal tyranny. The absolute monarchy was the first political resource of the bourgeoisie against the feudal lords. Its misconceptions of Thucydides, Levy, Pultrich, and Tacitus seemed like heaven on earth to the bourgeoisie. No taxation without representation, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, liberty, equality, and fraternity, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. These contained falsities, consciousness and unconscious, but the broke monstrous and avowed tyrannies. Workers of the world unite, aims at doing the same, but for the first time for over centuries, a political system with a great fanfare of newness and solutions to crises makes a political virtue out of tyranny, inequalities, class, racial, and national prejudice, and decries everything that European civilization has strived for, in the theory at least since the Renaissance. During Europe's worst period of reaction, the period of the counter-reformation of the Holy Alliance, the most reactionary writers could find something plausible to say in defense of their cause. German imperialism plundered in order to live. Fascism is the decline of the West, and its protagonists know it in their soul. There is writings on all subjects except the seizure of power, are nothing else but lies and nonsense, cold-blooded, deliberate falsification. Not a flower blossoms on their arid heaths. There is no soil in which anything can grow. There are just a thin cover of exhausted bourgeois societies. They can have nothing to say. Montaigne and Carlyle said all when the bourgeoisie still could guarantee some illusions. If Trotsky's history does not guarantee the inevitability of socialism, Mein Kampf guarantees the fraud of fascism as a solution to the ills of capitalist societies. Not only art, but science. That's the next section. What are we doing? We're doing good. We have carefully avoided hitherto dealing with the scientific aspects of Trotsky's history. It is familiar to all Marxists and gives the final endorsement of its values as propaganda on a grand scale. For whereas the other historians in the pursuit of their aims shape their material, as an artist shapes his figures, Trotsky claimed and irrefutably demonstrated that his history was scientific in that it flowed from the objective facts. He challenged anyone to question his documentations, and the challenge has never been taken up. The method of presentations, the book is as scientific as the origins of the species. It may be challenged as Darwin was challenged, but on concrete, not on abstract grounds. Not herald of liberty or of progress ever stood more firmly with both feet on the earth. And yet, in pure style, this materialist as rigid with the facts of, oh my gosh, Schellinger is succeeded in no sphere by any one of his ancestors, not the Thyeside in the proportion of lucidity, nor the Tactus in invective, nor in Gibbon in dignity, nor in Michelet in passion, nor by melancholy, by the great bourgeoisie in efficiency. There is a profound lesson here, not only in history but in aesthetics. And finally, the book is not only a propagandist tract, the expression of an attitude to society, a scientific thesis. It is besides what none of the others is. It is a summons to action. It is not only a banner and a blueprint. It is a roll of the drums. Through its breath, through it breathes not only the spirit of, quote, this is what we aim at. This is the way it is done, but also this is the way to do it. Every aspect of the struggle is scientifically analyzed and expounded, and the reader is not so much rhetorically exhorted to join up, but as he sees the difficulties and feels the unbounded confidence and unshakable will which attacks and overcome them. The knowledge of the power, he becomes part of this wonderful adventure. Resentment. Oh my gosh. You now, like, I've been online for like an hour and now they fucking flag me. Fucking bastards. Resentment at oppression smolders in hundreds of millions of people all over the world. What they lack is confidence in their own powers. How can we fight and win? The answer is that in the history. And by and large, the advanced guard of this generation have been ready for that answer. The translation, it has sold thousands upon thousands of copies. On the shelves of many ranks and files social democrats, it occupies as honored place, and it was penetrated into the homes of numerous Stalinists, and only book by Trotsky since his exiles to do so, despite their copious denunciation of all his writings. This is not one of its last triumphs. Had the Third International been a revolutionary organization, this book, with its knowledge, its confidence, and its will, would have inspired directly and indirectly millions of political leaders all over the world. History was deemed otherwise, but it is another proof of what we know in so many other fields, that it is Stalinism above all which confuses the working class, and keep away from it that knowledge and understanding without which it cannot conquer. The new class is willing to listen, and oh my gosh, excretions stand in the way. Powerful though it is still an excretions. To see the history in perspective, to the realization that it is Stalinism which is the accident, and that the proletariat and its spokesman, okay, great, you didn't prove it, you don't have to tell me. The spokesmen are a sequence in the movement of European life and thought, and as we know them for 5 centuries. How a classic is born? I like it. They're flag for what? Not visual stuff. The thing is, this guy's just describing like all like, this is great book, this, that, he does this. They're not even saying anything about the book. It's kind of annoying. That's another critique I have. Yeah, great. You're telling how great the book is. You're telling how it does this to this and this and that and the other, but you're not telling us anything about the book. Maybe now it will. Who knows? Now a book could be propaganda, track on the grand scale, an attempt at a scientific treatise, and a summons to action would be written by a highly gifted participant in a great event, and yet be merely one of many other books. The memoirs of all who took part in the last war are there to show that these are not sufficient to write a great book. That the history is what it is due certainly to Trotsky's power as a writer. There is no substitute for a great artist, but that for us is the last consideration. Now, people will admit that his books on the revolution of Russia was good. So there's a couple books that people say that it's worth reading, you know. But like he's not saying anything about what makes it, like, he's just saying the writer. He's great manning him again. But and his critique is great, but like, oh my God, Jesus Christ. With the Communist Manifesto began something entirely new in historical methods, specifically to show how the new method should be used. Marx deliberately wrote the 18th Premier, but afterward he and Engels wrote specifically on the history only as an occasion presented itself, and always to the point and no more. Bernstein and Kautsky wrote historical works which were illuminating by academic. The Marxist method enables you to write a scientific history because we believe in historical materialism, but it is not a talisman. Kautsky and Bernstein were bureaucrats, and on the one a concealed, and the other an avowed reactionary. And Marx's method, or no Marxist method, only passionate convictions can write a great book. Neither Lenin nor Rosa Luxemburg wrote history. Men of action must cease being men of action to write history, which demands the certain tranquility. But during all these years, there was accumulated in books, articles, and correspondence, a vast amount of thinking on history, isolated sketches, scholarly works, deductions and observations about classes, states, and insurrections, mass movements in the form of Marxist corpus. That was not collected anywhere, but the student of Marxism knew it. It was in the background of Lenin's mind always. He studied the proceedings of Cromwell's long parliament and the proceeding of the Paris Commune during the French Revolution, and thus tested and amplified the principles laid down by Marx. Trotsky followed this example only, whereas Lenin seemed by nature inclined to economic and statistical studies. Trotsky, natural instinct, as we have seen, drove him to history and writing. Trotsky also had met and talked with all of the great European Marxists of his time. In 1905 came the theory of the permanent revolution, and from that time on, not to mention the earlier years, how the Russian Revolution was developed as the main preoccupation of the Social Democrats in Russia and of European Marxists as a whole. But whereas everyone, according to his gifts and opportunities, contributed an analysis, no one, not even Lenin, analyzed more deeply than Trotsky. He had his theory to test and to defend. He was above all men of theory. Come on now. Thus, the structure and movement of the Russian Revolution was the very structure of his mental makeup. The axis around which he lived intellectually and emotionally came 1917, and for 7 intense months, first outside and then inside Russia, he saw and helped and guided. Thus, it is safe to say that no previous writer has ever so much completely mastered a great subject as Trotsky was the Russian Revolution, which is true. People say that those are good books to read from him. Politically, mankind came of age with the Russian Revolution. Caesar, Cromwell, Martin, Rosenspire, and other famous men had worked largely by instinct. For the first time in history, a man had foreseen the main lines of a great historical event, and had himself been instrumental in carrying it through to the successful conclusion. Lenin had to revise his conception, not Trotsky. Any writer, any artist would know the extraordinary power and confidence, the certainty of directions that would be Trotsky. Oh my gosh, he's still great manning him to death. When he sat down to write, such was the background, the interplay of class as a whole, and individual artists are fused here as nowhere else that we know in writing. But that is only half of the book. You haven't told us any of the book. You're just talking about how good he is and what he did. You're not telling us anything about the book. A revolution is the greatest event in the life of all those who experience it. It alters the food that you eat, the way that you eat it, the clothes that you wear, even the way of a man with a maid. And never were so many people jerked so far and with such violence as were the people of Russia by the October Revolution. Thus, for 1917 onward, the unending stream of reminiscence, memoirs, documents, conferences, conversations, contributions increasingly, unceasingly, to the consciousness of the leaders and the historical events who from the beginning were conscious of the historical selves, of their historical selves, as no other leaders in history, politicians, diplomats, aristocrats, and merchants wrote. The official historian collected by worker Bolsheviks, ordinary workers, ordinary peasants, ordinary soldiers, all poured their contributions in. How often Trotsky must have taken about the revolution to ordinary folk. How glad they were to talk to a man of October. How too much material can swamp but to Trotsky, who since 1905 had the main lines of the map clear. It defined, clarified, enriched, illustrated. Jesus Christ. He had remained a ruler of Russia. The book would never have been written, but driven into exile, he settled down. He settled down to it. He was at his desk at last, with pen in his hand. Into the book went all the historical knowledge and understanding which Marx and Engels had started to accumulate, and which the Marxists had continued step by step, as the proletariat and peasantry of the whole world moved slowly forward. All that Marx and Engels and Lenin had written and thought about great revolutions in the past and Trotsky's own discoveries. Lenin studied of 1905, the period in between 1905 and 1970. All the eruditions, conflicts throughout Russia's social democracy, and writings and analysis that followed 1917 of Lenin and Bukharin and Rogivsian, and scores of other gifts, men, and of all the millions of the Russian people. All these Trotskys gathered together. The artist himself suppressed for 40 years by the needs of the revolution, now opened out, and with the same personal force, discipline, and will which always distinguished him, be hammered this mountainous mass of facts and ideas around the theme of the class struggle into one of the most powerful impact and beautiful pieces of literature that exists in any language, prose or poetry. This dude is just oh my God. He's just talking about how good the book is without even telling us any of the context of the book. This is just yapping. That's all he's doing is yapping. To me, it just feels like he's just fucking yapping. Milton says that a great book of the precarious lifeblood of the master spirit. True. But in the history is the precarious lifeblood of many master spirits. I hate how he uses spirits too. Fucking annoying. And also of the Russian people, of the French proletariat. And in 1948 and 1870, those were both 18, of Ironside and Jacobins and I can't say those. That's a bad word. So I don't even know. Of the abortive German Revolution in 1918 and the Chinese and other nationalist revolutions. All are there. All had contribute their suffering, their hopes and wisdom that was drawn from their experiences. 100 years of socialist thought, proletarian struggles have gone into the making of that book. Jesus Christ. Talk about the damn book. and the first of its kind. No one will ever be able to write like it again for generations. Jesus Christ. Historians will write. Their wine will be new, but their bottles will be old. It is the first classic of socialist societies, and it will never be superseded. For there may become a time where capital will be the historic interest only, and when what is there to be done will be pondered over by students who will seek in vain to recapture the remote circumstances which produce Bolshevism and the imperialist age. But the history will remain the bridge between the long line which leads from the Old Testament and Homer, Greek tragedy, Dante, and Cervantes, to the books which will be written when, in Marx's famous phrase, the history of humanity begins. Oh my God. He says, he talks about how great the book is, but doesn't give us any insight into what the book says. He just says it's the greatest historical adventure ever. It's like, okay, great. Now tell us, give us some excerpts from it. The voice of the revolution. With the conclusion of the history, it might have seemed that Trotsky had done enough for one man, and yet infatuated aggression, exaggerations, though it may sound, his last phase is the most unprecedented of his wonderful career. He was the most powerful and celebrated exiles in history. Napoleon at St. Helena was out of it. Bismarck walked down the gangway and was rowed into oblivion. Napoleon III finished like the last discourse of a modern jazz composition. William added a beard to his mustache. These men ruled tremendous empires for many years and then sank from public affairs like stones. As for the social democratic rubbish of Kerensky and the Chernovs and the Bauers, the Chabroleurs, the Negrins, the Protas, I can't say these people's names. What a miserable down at heel assortment of discards, old curs with scarcely spirit enough to whelp at the moon, for nobody wants to hear them. All of them, kings and bureaucrats, could find a place to stay. Great organizations, sometimes great states, back them. Yet all added together, they amount to nothing. Trotsky could not rest anywhere. No country wanted him until Mexico had luster to its history by giving him a home. He was pursued by all the resources of the Soviet state. Despite the devoted solicitude of his supporters, he was often in financial straits. For though their devotion was unlimited, their numbers were few. Yet from all these difficulties, he emerged as a veritable tribune of the international working class, speaking for the proletarian revolution and for socialism, as no private individual ever spoke for any public cause. First was the gigantic conflict with Stalin and the Soviet bureaucracy. Never did any state spend so much time, energy, and resources in blackened the reputation and silenced the idea of the single individual. His supporters were systematically murdered. Unprecedented trials were arranged for the purpose of getting rid of internal enemies and utter discrediting him. Huge political parties all over the world carried out the orders and repeat the slander of Moscow. Almost single-handed, Trotsky, aided only by a small devoted band of followers, they did a great historical work, fought Stalinism to the finish, and inflicted upon it a resounding defeat. Jesus Christ. Today, the whole world knows that Stalin lied, oh my gosh, that Trotsky was no enemy of the Soviet Union, that he stood for the revolution. It was as it was originally conceived, and though they hated him for his unswavering devotion to revolution, yet his sincerity and his loyalty was the cause of socialism are no questioned. He fought for that, not an account of his personal reputation. He was always confident of the judgment of history, but because he knew that in attempting to discredit him, the Stalinists inside and outside of Russia sought to discredit the ideas for which he stood, the ideas of the revolutionary socialism, periodically the front pages of every newspaper of the world, were covered with the records of this great conflict, and Stalin, the ruler of 170 millions, and Trotsky, primus inter pares, of a few scattered thousand, meet as equals on the arena of world political opinions, of world public opinions. It will be said that historical events helped him to win his final victory. What infinite wisdom! Oh my gosh! As if Trotsky did not know that history was moving in a certain direction, and if all his efforts were not directed towards hastening and clarifying the process. God damn! This dude. If Trotsky was alive, he'd like idolize him and praise him and bow to him and shit. I swear to God. The Stalinists claimed that he gained all his publicity because he was an enemy of the Soviet state, of the Soviet Union, and a bourgeoisie used him. It is a pitiable self-deception. At the time of Moscow's trials, the Manchester Guardian was advocating an alliance between Great Britain and the Soviet Union. Yet it threw open its pages to him, for in the confusion all felt that only one man could help to elucidate the mysteries of. That man was Trotsky himself. That was the secret of his power. God damn, he's like, oh my gosh, this is killing me. He could clarify the world bourgeoisie in the confusion of which it finds itself. It learned something from him. He was prepared to speak whenever asked because he knew the limitations of bourgeois wisdom. Through his organs, he spoke to the workers about very important events, not only on revolution, on which he was an authority, but on every development in the steady progress to war. Journalists came, Jesus Christ, journalists from all over the world to interview him, certain that people would read eagerly what he said. His books were literary events, simultaneously reviewed everywhere and pondered over. To attribute it all to his personal brilliance, Jesus, and vigor and an incisiveness of his expression, it is an absurdity we have already dealt with earlier. Trotsky represented it adequately, magnificently, with a power that was all his own, but yet he was only a representative. He represented the proletariat in the period of the decay of capitalism. The proletariat is a mighty force in the modern world. If the radical intellectuals do not know it, the bourgeoisie does. The bourgeoisie listened to Trotsky because whether it recognized this or not, he represented the point of view of the world revolution. The bourgeoisie does not accept Marxism. It cannot. But it was obvious that too many bourgeoisie thinkers that on any knotty tangle of international politics, he always had something of value to say. Why had Schmittler come so easily to power in Germany? What was the significance of Schmittler? Why is Schmittler Stalin-packed? How would the war end? He told them what he thought. They listened to his predictions because these turned out to so often be true. But if they were hazy as to the source of his ideas, they had no illusions as to what use he intended to make them, and they carefully excluded him from their shores. When he died, in their news columns, the obituary noticed they recognized the greatness of the figure that had so dominated the social epic. Of their editorials, they vented their spleen against the implacable enemy of their society. Implacable. Almost implacable. For those who cannot understand history, there is a tremendous significance in the last period of Trotsky's life. Like some bold oh my gosh, I hate this. This guy just loves him to death. Like, come on. I'm not even this bad when it comes to my great man, but this dude, like, barely gives a critique and then says so many things like he's basically a god, which is fucking wild. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Reconnoiter.
Reconnoiter, which is making a preliminary survey or exploration of an area, usually in order to gain strategic information, assess geographical features, or observe an opposing force. Jesus Christ. He forced his way into the enemy camps and used every trick, wheel, and dodged at his command, and gave away particularly nothing. He carried on the battle, cleared paths, exposed danger, chartered a course, knowing that though the great armies had fallen behind and were stumbling, they were coming slowly, but exorbitantly, they were coming. And that, okay, great. And that almost alone he could do so much was a testimony not only to his personal qualities, but to his great forces, which he represented. How little some of his friends knew it, and how well his enemies. Stalin, aware of the state of his regime, and in what is tottering world he lived, did not count Trotsky meager following, and then sent back in comfort. He knew that as long as Trotsky lived and could write and speak, the Soviet bureaucracy was a mortal danger. In a conversation just before the war broke out, Schmittler and the French ambassador discussed the perils of plunging Europe into conflict and agreed that the winner of the Second Great War might be Trotsky. Winston Churchill hated him with a personal malevolence which seemed to overstep the bounds of reason. Those men knew his stature, the power of what he stood for, and were never lulled by the smallest of his forces. If some of our radical intelligentsias will not learn from Marxism, perhaps they will ponder on the view of Trotsky held by Stalin, Schmittler, and Churchill. The Fourth International. Jesus, dude. Oh my God. Stop great manning him. Give me some good, legitimate fucking critiques. Come on now. And yet his work, oh my God, we're back to it. And yet his work as a spokesman of a revolution was not his main occupation in this period. Not at all. For him, that was secondary. What interests him most was getting his ideas directly to the masses through revolutionary organization. His work is a chapter in itself. It is almost unknown to the general public. All of it is included in the words, quote, "the struggle for the Fourth International," end quote. We of the Fourth International know that what was the quality and quantity of that work, the enormous labor and knowledge and wisdom, the enthusiasm that he put into it. Always he saw history from a great height, yet disputes between 10 struggling young comrades 5,000 miles away from him, whom he had never seen or heard of until he wrote to him, would occupy his devoted attention for hours and hours at a time. People accuse Trotsky of impatience and domineering. They do not know what they are talking about. He had his opinion and fought for them. In ideological struggles, he was a relentless foe. With him, theory was not interesting, an idea to play with. It is the detestable habit of the bourgeois intellectuals. They were weapons in the class struggle. But to know and to appreciate his power and his past. Oh gosh, dude, the enormous force of his many sided and yet perfectly integrated personalities. Jesus Christ. And to see him listening patiently to some inexperienced comrades putting forward his inexperienced ideas, to read letters in which he took up some apparently minor point and elaborated in meetings all possible objections on one by one, was to have a great lesson in the difference between superficial arrogance, which often characterizes essentially sensitive men, and the oceans of strength, patience, and resiliency, which can come from complete devotion to the cause. Jesus Christ, how many times can you say these things? He's just repeating the same thing over and over again with different words. This is what I'm getting. That is the secret of his life and achievement. We cannot state it too often. The fact that he was not only gifted above his fellows, but that he really abandoned and bankrupt society and embraced a cause which used all that he had and placed no limits on his development. Bourgeois society limits and cramps and distorts. Winston Churchill is a man who in energy and diversity of natural gifts, courage and spirit, executive abilities, and artistic instincts could not have been anything, if at all, inferior to Trotsky. Yet look at the results. His whole Great Britain empire was throttled instead of developing him. It has debarred him from understanding history. He has no historical method. He was at the head of the British Navy in the last war and knew everything from inside, and yet his world crises is commonplace and full of windy rhetoric. His recent speeches are far above anything bourgeois democracy has produced in this crisis. He described with clarity and style. Yet, at the conclusion of one of his best efforts, all he can tell the British people is so to bear themselves, that if they lived 1,000 years, men shall say this war was their finest hour. It is not a chance phrase. Men in such times as these do not use chance phrases, perspectives. He has and can have none unless, like Schmittler, he turns himself indefinitely and cautiously around the tramples upon everything that humanity has aimed at. However, unsuccessful in thousands of years of painful efforts, all the gifts in the world would not have saved Trotsky from a similar fate had he limited himself to bourgeois society. Being determines consciousness in the struggle for socialism. He strides through the world, a titan among men, excelling in every field he touches. Jesus Christ. And exile half his life, persecuted as no man has been persecuted. That's bullshit. He lived in the fullest life of a human being hitherto. The field of being which he chose developed his consciousness to a pitch reached by few men. That consciousness, he did his best to pass it on to us. It is ours to guard from each according to our abilities. Yet let us see to it what we do our share. He himself belongs to history, and this is the historical evolution. But his death is recent enough, and each of us is personally indebted to him for too much is it to include a personal note. Motley closed his notable history of the Dutch Republic by saying of William and Silent that for 30 years he was the guiding star of the whole great nation. And when he died, the little children cried in the streets. Whenever the fates of our movements, whenever its success or failures, whenever our personal lives may hold to us who knew him and worked with him, now that he is dead, the world will never be the same again. September 1940. Oh my God, I couldn't take it anymore. Holy shit. Oh my God, he wasn't the greatest that got, oh my God. They put him on a platter, a non-needed platter. That was horrible. That was horrible. And that was a half-hearted holy shit. Anybody catch that, or is it just me? Is it just me? Jesus Christ. He was fucking, yeah, like, holy shit, dude. Like, why don't you just, like create a drone, a drone with him and just, be with him? Holy shit. Jesus Christ, that was they had better critiques in the last book. C.L.R. James had better critiques. This is not C.L.R. James. This is someone talking about Trotsky. C.L.R. James had better critiques in the book that's critiquing C.L.R. James and in that other book, the State Capitalism and World Revolution. This dude had like a little itty bitty critique, but the rest was just, he's the greatest person in the world and he deserves a medal. It's like, dude, come on, bro. Come on. You know? But I do kind of agree. I mean, there are some suspicions about that. But like the Trotskys, like when I read Mao Zedong's selected works, you talk about the Trotskyites and how they messed up like the revolution and how they are giving opportunity and things to like and that's true. That's true. You know. But fucking hell, like at least balance out the critique, because even in the internal critique of the book I'm reading by C.L.R. James, not by C.L.R. James, about C.L.R. James, it's balanced out. It balances the critique and the goodness. Even when he critiques like past, like Hegel, when he critiques like Kant, he balances out the critique. You know, here, no balance. It was mostly like 95% all the greatest things he could ever think of about Trotsky, and then like 10, and then like 5% of, oh, he did this bad. He did this bad. It's like, oh my God, dude. Oh my God, there's got to be more. Because there's got to be more. There's a lot of people that... So I didn't like that section. But the next section should be better. And we're going to end here. Because I'm annoyed. I'm a bit annoyed, as you can tell. We're going to end here. It says imperialism in Africa. So hopefully it's something new. Hopefully we can get away from the fucking bullshit. That dude's a trot. That dude is a trot. I might read Stalin, but in my own personal thing. What page? 141. I might read some Stalin stuff later, because the only thing I've read from Stalin is the foundations of Leninism and also his historical materialism and historical materialism. Those are the only things I wrote. But I might have to read to like have more of a critique. But Jesus Christ, man, have I ever been that bad when I have great man things? Because I have great man Mao, I have great man George Jackson, I have great man Fanon. I have great man Lenin. So I've done that, but was I that bad? I hope I wasn't that bad. Jesus Christ. Okay, thank God I wasn't that bad. Anyways, hopefully we'll have a better reading. So we're reading time, since now hopefully we're moving away from that monotonous bullshit. I feel like it was monotonous bullshit. Honestly, I think it was monotonous bullshit. And moving on to hopefully more substance and more things. Because the other thing, my other critique of that too, is he talked about how great the books were, how great this was, without giving any examples of why, what made it, what makes it great, what is his analysis that makes it true. There was none of that. It was just, they like this, they like this, and these people sucked. It had nothing to do with like, particularly what exactly was the content of it. So yeah, this was Bernie bro so bad. Yeah, I agree. This was a Bernie bro moment where like Bernie Sanders can't do no bad, neither couldn't Harris. Like dude, man, come on, dude. If you're a fucking Marxist, man, you can compliment the person for his goodness, but you have to critique the failures and the things. No, I get that when he said that that like theory is nothing to not take serious. I agree with that part. Theory is something serious, because you're going to take theory through your observation. No, this dude just like, we're reading a little bit of like Trotsky stuff in here, and this dude was just kissing Trotsky's ass, putting him on like this pedestal of godliness. It was so annoying with very little critique. In fact, James, this wasn't James doing it. In fact, when I read this previous book, Make America Go Away, when I read C.L.R. James's previous book, where he actually wrote it and said things in it, he had better critiques of Trotsky. He balanced out the critiques and gave away the critiques. This dude gave 5% of Trotsky's critiques and usually gave him as a god. Because there is one book that people should read. Yeah. There is one book though, and it's Trotsky's Russian Revolutionary book. Multiple people have said that are not Trotsky's, that's a book that was good. But god damn, dude, No balance in the critique. Nothing. Zero. Just straight up just sucking the teat. You know? So, yeah. But, yeah. Yeah. But, like, but, Jesus Christ. So, hopefully the next session will be better. You have not finished it? Alright, well, it'll be good. It's good. Like, there's tons of, critiques that C.L.R. James did. Because C.L.R. James used to be a Trotsky. He's part of the Johnson Forrest tendencies. They moved away from the biggest Trotskyist movement, and they moved away from Trotskyism. And one of the biggest things that James says, the reason why they moved away, because Trotsky didn't have an answer. The Trotskyists did not have an answer, and they betrayed the black proletariat, basically. They betrayed the black proletariat. And that's something C.L.R. James, because C.L.R. James is also part of the development of Pan-Africanism to help keep it going and stuff like that. So, like, C.L.R. James moved away from Trotsky for one of those. That was one of the reasons why. So this might be like his earlier work might just indicate him as a Trotskyist, but he moved away. So that's the thing. And in this book that I'm reading right here, it tells you the multiple things that he moved away from and why. So yeah. But the only thing that like is questionable about C.L.R. James is he thinks that the spontaneity of, which I'm going to look at more. He thinks the spontaneity can be organized into an organic vanguard, but he has a critique of the vanguard party. He has a huge critique of the vanguard party, you know? So I want to see the critique, because I still believe in a vanguard type system, but organically made, you know what I mean? Organic vanguard system, you know? Yeah, I know, it's weird. Yeah. But okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it. I appreciate the interactions and stuff like that. I'm gonna go get elevated and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah, exactly. The CIA works. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming in. We'll read. Hopefully, the next section will be better. All right. I'm glad.